All right, so good evening, Reverend Michael McMorrow. Reverend Dr. Michael McMorrow. I have to get used to that. So if you haven't heard the news, if you're just a Wednesday nighter, I've been honored with an honorary doctorate from Centers for Spiritual Living, our home organization and denomination. So it was quite a surprise. And so I'm still kind of getting used to the idea, along with everyone else. So for those of you who knew me when, what can I say? What a long, strange trip it's been. All right, so we have this evening something a little different. We're going to do a meditation in the middle of it. But we're going to do an ancestral remembrance, an evening of ancestral remembrance. So I have some readings that we're going to do, and then we'll have a little meditation time in the middle of that, and Renzen's going to get us set up with a little music while we do that, which is something a little different than we regularly do. And then for those of us who are here in the sanctuary, including our sound people, we have here a book of life that you can write in the names of anyone who you would like to remember in this book of life. So I thought there might be a few people here tonight, so I already have written in some people, my family members. And so at the appropriate time, I'll invite all who want to, and then you will take a candle and place it at your mom's photo, and then others will light the place up. So I'm going to ask Mike if he will come on up, and if you could light the ofrenda while I go through lighting the flames of faith. All right, so let's just begin by taking a deep conscious breath as we do at all our services here. Just taking in that breath of life and just releasing it, allowing ourselves to surrender to this eternal now moment as we come together for our call to service, which we call lighting the flames of faith. So we have behind us our flames that have already been lit. So let's just get with it. So we perform this ceremony to promote the universal consciousness of life, which acknowledges that all peoples, all faiths, all sentient beings come from the one great universal presence, which we call spirit. That fundamental to this truth is a unifying nature of all religious thought and experience, which we honor here this evening. So the first candle we light for the Tao, honoring the universal path of harmony and equilibrium, the natural way. We light the second candle for shamanic traditions, honoring the beliefs and practices of all indigenous peoples, the way of primal spirituality. We light the third candle for Hinduism, honoring the path of knowledge, action, and devotion. We light the fourth candle for Judaism, honoring the ethical path of living by sacred law. The fifth candle we light for all forms of Buddhism, honoring the Four Noble Truths and the path of compassion. The sixth candle we light for all forms of Christianity, honoring the Christ consciousness as the path of love. We light the seventh candle for all forms of Islam, honoring the path of submission to the will of God as the highest calling. We light the eighth candle for the universalistic religion of Baha'i, honoring the path of unity and peace. We light the ninth candle for all forms of New Thought, honoring the metaphysical path of mental healing through the practice of universal spiritual principles. The 10th candle we light for all those who are as yet unaware of the power and presence of Spirit in their lives, and the space we make for them, we hold for them here at our center, within our online community, and within our own hearts. And as we light the healing candle, please put silently into the light the names of anyone you wish to have experience the healing flame of God's eternal love. Oh, we can't do the music without the iPad, is that right?
God.
Take a breath with me again and release. And in that release, we're just coming together as sacred community, as beloved community, as we recognize together that there is but one power, one presence, one source, one life, one living intelligence, one infinite heart of the divine that is both impressing and expressing itself in, through, and as all of life, in, through, and as our life. And so we each go within and connect with this eternal truth within, connect with that flame of the divine within the hearts of all beings. And so from this place of conscious contact with the One, we sense a common unity with each other that transcends time, even space. That even electronically we know that we are connected in this moment as we come together to remember our ancestors. That we know that there is a divine imprint within the very makeup of our cellular structure, within our DNA is a divine imprint of all of those who've come before us through all the eons of time that allow us now to breathe into this moment and experience the eternality of the soul within ourselves, and to know this truth for those who have come before us and have gone before us. And so as we honor this time of year that has within the cultural, subjective mind of man a call for remembrance, whether it's through the Celtic traditions of Samhain, the Christian traditions of All Saints and All Souls Day, or even the recognition of Dia de los Muertos, which is yet another emanation of this remembrance. And so, however culturally, however spiritually we are connecting with this moment, we're just allowing ourselves to have this time together to remember in love, in communion, and even reconciliation. To consider the sacredness of life, even as we acknowledge the passing of our loved ones here this evening. So we take a deep breath with all of this and just release. Release with deep gratitude and confidence, knowing that we are releasing to the infinite heart of the divine, expressing His perfect law through this thing called life. So we just let it be so. Let this evening be so. Let ourselves be so. And so it is. And so, as I said, this evening is different, a little bit different. So welcome to those of you who've joined us in the sanctuary. And we have, maybe we can, Mike, I'm going to throw another curveball at you. Michael, if you can just kind of do a close-up on the ofrenda here. Oh, Renzen's on the joystick. So just follow however you like, but we have photographs of our loved ones that people have either emailed in or sent in or brought in. So over here is the McMorrow corner. So my dad and my Uncle Jimmy, and I need to move my mom over there. They were all friends in life. And then we have Rachel back here and some of our beloveds. I recognize Rosalie's dad and his wife Julie there, and Mike's folks are up here along with his sister, family from Reverend Jessica. Reverend Nancy has her sister up here, and we see Miriam's mom, and we have Nelson Mandela even. Isn't that nice? And other folks who I don't know. I think this might be Kim Wellness family. So we're remembering, so this is an ancestral remembrance evening. And so I just have a few thoughts that I was going to share, and then we will have some meditation time. And then for those who are here in the sanctuary after the meditation, then I'll invite folks to come up and place whoever they want into this book of life that we've gotten started here. And then we have a few more things after that. So what happens when we die? I have a friend who once asked a colleague about her late husband. Where do you think my husband is after he died? And being a good religious scientist, Dr. Mark Vieira responded, wherever he thinks he is. But what happens when we die is perhaps the first great existential question. It's the question that all of the major faith traditions and philosophies have developed their own understandings. So I just wanted to share a little bit from, as just kind of a setup. So within Greek mythology, for instance, you have Zeus, who is the Lord, the king of the gods, if you will, and his brother Hades, who is king of the underworld, and Demeter, who was the goddess of the earth, and then she had a daughter named Persephone, who is the daughter of Zeus and Demeter. And she became queen, she being Persephone, became queen of the underworld after her abduction by Hades, who would be her uncle, by the way, the god of the underworld, with the approval of her father, Zeus. The myth of her abduction, her sojourn into the underworld, and her temporary return to the surface represents her functions as the embodiment of spring and the personification of vegetation, especially grain crops, which spring and the personification, which disappear into the earth when sown and sprout from the earth in spring and are harvested when fully grown. So we have this idea of death and regeneration or resurrection, if you will. So in classic Greek art, then, Persephone is invariably portrayed robed, carrying a sheaf of grain. Perhaps you've seen this. And she may also appear as a mystical divinity with a scepter and a little box, but she's mostly represented in the process of being carried off to Hades. Now, why is this important? Because it sets up my first reading for tonight. And this is from the book Care of the Soul by Thomas More. So this idea of abduction, being taken to the underworld, to face, the struggle that represents being taken away and being brought into the darkness, and then the regeneration of life. And he's using this as a metaphor for the following: that the soul needs to establish itself in the deathly realm as well as in life. Now, this can be hard to hear when we've lost someone who is dear to us. But the soul needs to establish itself in the deathly realm as well as in life. So most of us can probably tell stories, 3 or 4 Persephone experiences of the struggle and periods of darkness and pain. And as we tell the stories, we probably include a theme of resurrection also. I got through this period in my life and now I'm better for it. And what got us through these encounters with Hades was the profound maternal feeling in us for life, continuity, for fruitfulness. A deep-seated love of life and its possibility is the gift of Demeter, right, the goddess of the earth, which paradoxically becomes more intense and more solidly established in those episodes when it is severely threatened. What could the celebrants at Elysius did in their great celebrations of Demeter to hold a shoot of grain in our hands and recall that life in our pain, in our suffering, in our dark periods, in our bereavement, to remember that life continues to be fruitful in a world that is being penetrated, in a world that's being penetrated by all forms of death. So the story serves as a meditation of death itself. Hades may pull us under by means of an experience of death, either a close call for ourselves or the death of someone close to us. It takes profound maternal affirmation of life to allow such depths to affect us. Right? So there's something that happens in grief where our heart softens, often beyond our control. Right? We may even attempt to fight it, and yet it washes over us and has its way with us and softens that hard shell of the heart and allows us to be vulnerable and to feel life more deeply and to feel the dark places of life. Sometimes so far that we may feel like Persephone, that we may never find our way back. And yet still, we eat of the fruits of the underworld, if you will, and we emerge into life again, feeling a sense of renewal. And so we have remembrance rituals like those found in the Celtic tradition of Samhain, which is the basis of the celebration of Halloween. That's where it came from. So the Irish are good for many things. That's one of them. Right? But also in Dia de los Muertos, which comes out of mostly Mexico. And so it has connections to an Aztec, a deep cultural Aztec connection to life and to death through the Christian tradition, also of resurrection and of the life to come. So Moore says that when we allow experiences of death to touch us and take us down, we come back with the seeds of the pomegranate within us, and that fruit that looks sunny and whole on the outside, and yet still has an articulated interior and is filled with those dark seeds that recall the underworld. So for those of us who've been touched by grief, the seeds can be there. And they need to be, I think, acknowledged. Because like a wise mother who knows that her child can only become a person by living in this mystery, right? By finding their own individual way in the world. That there's got to be a maternal a wisdom, a spiritual maturity that allows ourselves to become fully individualized with all aspects of life, so that we can go from feeling individualized to being fully realized, and then realized in the light of the divine and in its expansion of both consciousness, not only in the ways that we feel in the world, but that it also opens our heart and opens our mind so that we are now more present in the world. So much as we try, like Buddha's parents, we may try to protect our children in vain from the pains of life, right? That ultimately to try to protect them in some smothering way, right? Ultimately, life has its way. And that the child ultimately must be allowed to take the risk. And so we, too, as people living this, making our way through the world, need to be able to find our own way through all aspects of life. And in fact, the Buddhists themselves say that as we become comfortable with death, as we become specifically more comfortable with our own death, we can more fully live our own life. So that's what the ancients had to say. And then the Celtic, so this time of year is actually a time of the Celtic New Year, a couple days ago actually. And so All Souls Day was actually November 2nd, but we wanted to do this thing tonight. And so in the Celtic traditions in Irish households, they would sweep the hearth clean, and they would prepare the meal, and they would actually invite the ancestors to come join them for a meal for this one night of the year when the veil between the underworld and the life in which we live is thin. And it was believed that the spirits of the ancestors would then would be available to visit. And so I'm going to ask you now to just take a deep breath and release. And we're just going to do a little meditation for this portion. Just following the breath and imagining ourselves in our home hundreds of years ago, that we've swept the hearth and cleaned away the ashes, built a good fire with a nice hearty meal in the pot, and maybe even a spot of poachine on the side. And maybe we'll bring up some music here. Just turn it down. And so the veil between the worlds is thin, and so we open our heart now in remembrance of those who've come before us. Perhaps parents, our mother, our father. Just breathe into that. And their grandparents. Breathe into that. And their great-grandparents, and on back through time. Whose names have been long forgotten, but still are alive in the soul of you and me. So we'll just be still for a moment and allow whatever message or wisdom or love So I share with you now this Samhain prayer to the ancestors, staying with the breath, just allowing these words to wash over us as we call to mind in welcoming and loving memory. This is the night. This is the night when the gateway between our world and the spirit world is thinnest. Tonight is a night to call out those who came before. Tonight I honor my ancestors, spirits of my fathers and mothers. I call to you and welcome you to join me for this night. You watch over me always, protecting and guiding me. And tonight I thank you. Your blood is my blood. Your blood runs in my veins. Your spirit is in my heart. Your memories are in my soul. With the gift of remembrance, I remember all of you. You were dead but never forgotten, and you live on within me and when those who are yet to come. So that Samhain now is here. The new year is here. The cold is the earth as we celebrate the cycle of death and rebirth. Tonight we speak to those through the veil. The lines between the worlds are thin and frail. Ghosts and spirits in the night. Magical beings rising in flight. Owls hooting up in a moonlit tree. I don't fear you, and you don't fear me. As the sun goes down far to the west, my ancestors watch over me as I rest. They keep me safe and without fear on the night of Samhain, the witches' new year. Staying with the breath. So we call forth now through the veil, the veil between the worlds and the veil between memory. As we recall now our loved ones, so when you're comfortable here in the sanctuary, you can come forward now and write their names in the book of life. Light a candle, and we have plenty. So if you got a lot of family, that's good. So I'm going to add some names for people who have been part of our congregation. Although Mike has a couple of them covered here, so Karen Hudson, right? Yeah, thank you. And Jade. And so I was going to add Rachel and Mark Gravel. And Bob Strader. Stan Weissel. Stan was a benefactor of our center, so way back when we did the rebuild, he lent us the money to do everything that you see here. And that is Reverend Jeannie's late husband. And he just passed this past year. And the family of Susana Velasquez, they lost 6 people in their family this year. I know that Susana would be here, except for these weird COVID times. I also added Herman Woods, who is Reverend Nancy's late husband, and Reverend Catherine Perdone, who was Reverend Nancy's sister, who died a couple of years ago, and she was the pastor of the Church of Christ over in Lake North Hills or Sun Valley. And so I'm now going to light a candle for them. And this is for the family of Reverend Jessica Fish. And my high school friend I just heard about, Kathy Allred Reeder, and her mother. Used to bust my chops when I was a teen. She was a force of nature. And so the ofrenda is meant to kind of take the sting out of things, right? So it's a time of remembrance. that death is part of life. And it's also meant to be, at baptism in the Christian rite, you put salt as well as sweet on the tongue of the infant to prepare them for life, that it's going to have both, right? And this is for Mark Gravel and his beautiful stepdaughter, Margot's daughter, Rachel, who is also connected to our Sangha. Whoops. So Herman Woods. So you set up the ofrenda, and if we were gathering together, and particularly with those who this has been part of their family culture, so a family would have an altar set up, and then there would be pictures. So for instance, my friend Kathy was a skier, and so you would have maybe some mementos of skiing. My Uncle Jimmy over there loved Budweiser, so you would have a bottle of Bud, and then you would tell stories. So I want to tell a story about Herman Woods on the night of his death. I had been made aware that Maureen was being recruited away to Westlake, but it wasn't yet official. And it wasn't yet certain that I would become the minister of this place. And I don't think Reverend Nancy will mind me telling this story. Reverend Nancy, who rarely calls me for prayer, and it's usually the other way around, right? But she calls me for prayer. I'm in my townhouse in Winnetka, and Herman had been working through cancer diagnosis, and she was at the hospital. And do you want me to go down there? No, it'll be okay. And so now I'm pacing back and forth in my apartment. Should I go? And finally, she said not to come. I want to respect her wishes. Finally, I just said, to hell with it, I'm going. And I did. And I got there, and I knew that Herman was being very private about what was going on. And he really wasn't taking visitors, and he didn't want to talk about it, and that was okay. So I was just kind of hanging out and just being there. And so Herman told Nancy to bring me back, which she did. Now, as it happens, Herman and I were the only two guys here at the center at the time who would talk about football. We were both fans of the NFL. And he was a huge fan, and from New York. And Brett Favre, longtime player, if you know the NFL, Favre had been with the Green Bay Packers forever, and now he was a free agent, and it wasn't known whether he was going to play for the hated Vikings or not. And so I went back there, and I said to him, you don't have to go through all this. I could have come over to your house, right? So I'm just trying to be light. And I said, you can't go yet because we haven't found out if Favre is going to the Vikings or not, right? So we're just kind of joking back and forth, and finally he takes my arm, he grabs me by the arm, and he looks me in the eye, and he said, Mike, I'm serious now. You got to do this thing. You got to take this church. This is yours to do, and you need to step into it now. And the hairs stood up on the back. Very moving, right? And so now here we are now, right? I've just been awarded this doctorate. So Herman, you're a big part of this, brother. And as is all of this community, right? As is all of our ancestors, really, right? So we're all coming together to do this thing of spiritual community. And so in the ofrenda, that is exactly what this is for sharing stories and the joys, and even sometimes the way they might make you crazy, and there might be cigarettes up there. And so Dia de los Muertos then is a celebration of the life of the person who has passed. And so I'm going to close with this. And it is also tied to the Christian rite, actually the Catholic rite of All Souls Day. And so I wanted to share with you this prayer from Sister Joni Luna, who is with the Providence Sisters. Provident God, she says, your love brings us to birth. Your providence guides our lives, and by your promise we return to dust. Creator of the universe, in your grace you promise us that those who die still live in your presence. Their spirits have simply been transformed and have not ended. I pray in gratitude and hope for my family, relatives, and friends that have gone before me, and for all the dead known to you alone, accompanied with the Christ, who died and rose from the dead and now lives and reigns with you in unity with the Holy Spirit. This is very Catholic, by the way. May they rejoice in your kingdom as you unite us together again this sacred morning to worship you. And then from our own tradition of religious science, this from the chapter Immortality from Reverend Dr. Ernest Holmes. Poets have sung of eternity of the soul. Poets have sung of the eternality of the soul, while the saints and sages of the ages have assured us that man is an immortal being. It is recorded that Jesus rose from the dead and made himself known to his immediate followers. The faith of countless millions of the Christian religion has been based, to a great extent, on its teachings of immortality. The philosophy of Christianity can be traced largely to Greek thought and ideas, as we explored here this evening, but the Christian religion itself rests its greatest hope on the assurance that a man rose from the dead and passed from this plane to the next, retaining and carrying with him into the beyond those qualities and attributes which constitute that personal stream of consciousness known as the individual. But I cannot, this is Holmes, I cannot base my hopes of immortality on the revelation of anyone but myself. So far as I am concerned, nothing can exist to me unless I am aware of it. While I believe in other men's revelations, I am sure only of my own. I look upon the belief in immortality neither as a vague dream, nor a forlorn hope, but as a proven fact. A proven fact. One cannot doubt that which he knows to be so, and why should he deny the evidence of his senses, his reason, and his personal experience in the one field more than in another? Immortality, or the continuation of the personal existence beyond this life, has been so completely demonstrated to me that it would be unthinkable for me to assume an opposite position, even for the purpose of debate. Here within myself is something that knows. Here is something that knows that it is, and knows that life itself moves with the tide as irresistible as the recurring seasons. I do not believe in the return of the soul to another life on this plane. The spiral of life is upward. Evolution carries us forward, not backward. Eternal and progressive expansion is its law, and there are no breaks in its continuity. It seems to me that our evolution is the result of an unfolding consciousness of that which already is and needs but to be realized, to become a fact of everyday life. I believe in planes beyond this one without number, in eternal progress. I cannot believe that nature is limited to one sphere of action. So Ernest Holmes is not telling us to believe this. He's leaving this open to ourselves. That's the thing that I like about this teaching, that we are open at the top. And so let's just take a breath and just allow ourselves to surrender to this moment of conscious union with this one eternal life. The mystery, the wonderful mystic revelation of God to ourselves. That we understand and know through our work here this evening that the eternality of the soul is as sure to us within our own understanding of it. And so we open to a greater experience of it. And in this understanding, then we know that we then grow in faith, in a love that is bound by nothing but our own thinking. And so we open our mind, we open our heart to a sense of being restored to wholeness in the continuity of the eternality of the one soul expressing as all of life. That we allow ourselves in our softness of vulnerability, in grief, to feel a sense of knowing that all is well, that we are good with our grief. We embrace the softness that it brings to our life. We embrace the open-heartedness that it brings to ourselves to be more compassionate and more loving and more kind to others. That we ourselves are more gentle and kind to those who are suffering within their own experience of life. And that we see this as good, as very good. For it is all God the good. That our good is our God. And our God is our good. And so we rest confidently in knowing this truth in a deeper way this evening. We take a deep breath and release this experience of life tonight, this experience of death tonight, that we're just releasing all of it to that aspect of the one Spirit, the wellspring of love itself expressing as the law of its own being, as life. So we embrace it. We go forth tonight feeling a sense of restoration and wholeness, and a sense that all is well, that we, as our head hits the pillow tonight, we drift off easily to sleep, dreaming sweet dreams, that we awaken feeling refreshed, restored, revitalized, full of vim and vigor and a zest and excitement for life. For we know, as Holmes says, that while we live, we really live. So we just step into it now. Taking a deep breath, releasing all of it in deep gratitude and confidence, knowing it is done, knowing it is so, and together we acknowledge this by saying, and so it is. Amen. Thank you for joining us. Go in peace.